town of Bedford sits quietly in the foothills of Virginia. With a population of only 3,200, the bonds between the children of Bedford developed at a very young age. Little do these children know, within the next 2 decades, 30 of these boys would enlist in the United States military. They never imagined that the world would be in the midst of the most destructive war it had ever faced, nor did they suspect that 22 of these young men from Bedford would perish on the beaches of Normandy. Despite their losses, their sacrifice would lead the Allied powers into triumph on June 6, 1944, in the battle known as D-Day. These men would forever be known as the Bedford Boys. For 2 decades after World War I, European countries had struggled to stabilize their power. Adolf Hitler took advantage of the chaos and rose to power with his Nazi party in Germany, aiming for world domination. On September 1, 1939, Hitler unleashed a terror attack by the Germans on Poland. 2 days later, France and Britain declared war, officially marking the start of World War II. On December 7, 1941, when the Japanese launched a massive attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, Congress promptly declared war on Japan. Germany and the other Axis powers therefore declared war on the United States, officially bringing the United States into World War II. Germany had built up Fortress Europe with its impregnable Atlantic Wall, a series of concrete defenses all along the Atlantic Ocean, leaving the Allies scrambling for a strategy to establish a foothold on the continent. After years of planning and compromising between the leadership, the Allies, led by Dwight Eisenhower, had a multifaceted plan to invade Normandy, France. There would be over 9,000 ships carrying over 150,000 men in the largest amphibious invasion in history. These men, American, British, and Canadian, were expected to invade 5 beaches. The Americans were responsible for Utah and Omaha. The plan became known as Operation Overlord and also referred to as D-Day, a military reference to the start of the fighting. Before the war, many of the Bedford boys had joined the National Guard to try and earn some extra money during the Depression. But in February of 1941, their division was activated and started training with the 29th Infantry. The 30 Bedford boys became Company A of the 116th Infantry Division of the 29th Infantry. The call came to ship out, and Lucille Bodges, who had 2 brothers ship out, recalls the day.
My parents and most all of us went to see them off, Bodges said. We were just kind of saying goodbye, but we'll see you soon. And it wasn't like they weren't coming back.
The 29th Infantry Division left for England and began training for another 21 months.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months.
The Bedford boys were the first wave of ships to be launched on Omaha Beach. On June 6, 1944, the boats appeared along the shore of Normandy. Most of the Bedford boys met their demise in the first 20 minutes. The boats approached shore, carrying the soldiers, many from Bedford. Some ships sank before they could even lower their ramp. Roy Stevens was one among the LCA 911. Some men had been seasick and others waited for their time to pile off the boat.
"We're sinking!" Roy Stevens cried.
The ship had a hole where water gushed, causing it to sink. Some men aboard jumped into the water, struggling to stay afloat.
"I'm drowning!" one of the men shouted.
Roy Stevens saw James Padley disappear under a wave. Many boats began to lower their ramps when they got close enough to shore. Piling out, the soldiers were instantly targets for the Germans. Lieutenant Ray Nance had to shove the ramp on his boat down and witnessed the bullets zipping through the air. John Clifton, a fellow man from Bedford, was a soldier alongside Ray Nance.
"I'm hit!" cried Clifton.
Ray Nance continued on after losing sight of Clifton. He fired his gun at a faceless enemy as mortars were launched and exploding near him.
"Spread out!" shouted Nance.
Men approached the shore differently. Some took a straight-on tactic, while others zigzagged ashore. They did what they thought was best for survival, yet most of the men from Bedford perished on the invasion, despite their tactics. 22 out of the 30 boys who came from Bedford, Virginia, lost their lives in Normandy. They never returned home after World War II ended. Families refused to believe the worst. They waited on news of whether their sons, brothers, and friends had survived.
I had a job to do, a responsibility. I don't remember crying, but it was shocking to get so many messages and keep them confidential and find someone to take them out to the families. It was one of the saddest things I've ever had to do, delivering that sad news to a loved one.
Each family processed their grief differently. Raymond and Bedford Hobach's mother cried through the night for her sons. One family member, such as Frank Draper Jr.'s father, were angry. He spoke of how he wanted to
blow Franklin D. Roosevelt's brain out. There was some bitterness and anger expressed at the time by the people of Bedford to some veterans who returned. This bitterness existed because they had lost their loved ones and they found it difficult to accept the returning men. Charlie Chadbourne III.
The grief took forms in different ways and loomed on the people for many years. While the families grieved over the tragedy that struck the town, the Allies overwhelmed the Germans and claimed a victory in the invasion of Normandy. D-Day was known as the beginning of the end of World War II. The Allies had managed to push the Germans back and reinforcements had come. After D-Day, the Allied powers were able to push eastward. All the while, the Soviet Union was entrenching on German territory. After almost another year of fighting, the Allies entered Berlin and found Adolf Hitler dead after he had committed suicide on April 30th, 1945. Germany held little resistance and surrendered on May 8, 1945, and the Allies accepted Germany's surrender, a victorious triumph for the Allies. While the invasion of Normandy was a huge success, creating a foothold on Europe that would bring a sensational end to World War II, Bedford, Virginia would never forget their losses, and the survivors of the invasion lived with the memories of war.
One of them, Ray Nance, he didn't really talk a lot about his service before the National D-Day Memorial was constructed. He saw that a fellow D-Day veteran was wanting to build this memorial. It was going to be built in Bedford, and he became one of the leading supporters of it. He came out, was giving tours before it was officially open. So there weren't a lot of Bedford boys who survived to the construction of the National D-Day Memorial. For the most part, many of them just went on life as normal. It wasn't expected. You weren't expected to dwell on losing your buddies and what the war was like. You're expected to be a man, move on with your life, have a family, get a job, do that.
Hitler and his Nazi party tried to expand their power, causing the world to enter World War II. 85 million people lost their lives because of this conflict. Of those deaths, Bedford, Virginia offered 22 lives of their young men who volunteered for the National Guard and were enlisted into the war. Not only were these men friends and brothers from the same town, but they all left their families in a town to mourn them forever.
I've often thought, well, if all these men had come back, how would this community be different, and what contribution would they have made? And I just felt like it would have been a better place, and I think that we still sort of cry for them and miss them.